Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, it's been a little while since I've made a video. I've been working away for quite some time. But in the background, I've been working on this behemoth. So, just a precursor to this, this isn't going to be the this isn't going to be the highest DPS build that you're ever going to see. But it's definitely a tanky build, and it's definitely a way to get totems back on the menu. Now, the idea for this version of this build came from actually playing the Gauntlet League, which I was playing a hardcore version of this character and realized this is a super tanky character, which is Avenging Flame or Flamewood Totems, which we'll talk about very shortly. And basically, then I was like, well, what if I turn this into an endgame ignition-based build, which ended up getting me to, if I can find the video, the build POB, it got me to like the vicinity of like 2.394 million ignite dot. And if you're able to fit Malevolence into the build, which is pretty easily done by simply just adding in Malevolence and Divine Blessing and then dropping off another aura or adjusting your gems, you get it to like 3.5 million ignite dot, which is pretty consistent with like an average Joe Blow old RF build from the last leagues before they've nerfed RF. So it puts it in the category of very similar to RF, but with totems, which was one of the ideas behind it. Now, basically how it works is it can only realistically be played on the Chieftain effectively, and that's because of this node here called Arahongui, however you pronounce that, Moon's Presence, which basically means that totems taunt enemies around them for 4 seconds when summoned. So it basically requires you to be constantly taunting enemies around for your totems to be able to trigger Flamewood, which is a support gem which you attach into the 6-link setup that I've got in this. And then basically it launches off like an artillery sort of projectile, if you want to call it that. And then that hits the enemy, ignites, and then we've got Prolif built into the build with Ignite Prolif as well. You could also get this on your gloves, and you could get it on a cluster jewel, for example, with Fan the Flames. And then basically that then lights up the enemies. Now, as far as I've gotten this sustainability wise into like Delve, well, I managed to get this down to about 881 depth in Delve. So it's pretty tanky. So the other thing with tankability on this build, it's a little different. We'll talk about it when we get into the gearing, is it does use Cloak of Flame, which requires you to overcap your fire res, which gets you to 90%, which I've managed to achieve here by various means. And basically the best in-slot shield, at least at this stage, as a combination between Rise of the Phoenix or Dawnbreaker. If you get to the point where you're able to convert more of your physical damage to fire damage, then basically Dawnbreaker is going to be the best go, because it's going to give you anywhere up to 20%. Which then, the more you do that, the more you fully mitigate it with overcap reses, means that physical damage does nothing to your character, which makes it the ultimate Delve build. Couple of caveats: not really good at taking on like Crystal Kings. It's good at about 500 depth, and then after 600 it's just a grind fest to kill the bosses. It can kill them. If they've got like regen mods or consecrated ground mods, no chance. You're not going to be able to take it down. So very much like how RF used to travel as it got to like 500-600 plus, unless you had like mirror tier geared, you're not going to be able to do it. You don't really need a Progenesis on it, but Progenesis makes it better. Now Mageblood I've got on it, but realistically Immortal Flesh works fine. And that's because we have so much resistance in the overcap, you don't really need to worry about like your flasking and things like that buffing you up so significantly. They can just be on auto trigger flask, so that is fine. So you can play it without Mageblood easily enough. And then beyond that, it basically just uses like RF style scepters. Helm, I had ES on it, but I'm thinking about changing that again, and that was mainly so that I could set up my my Malevolence and Divine Blessing, so I could automatically trigger that. And you can do that by having Replica Sorrow of the Divine, which converts your ES pool into your mana pool, similar to Eldritch Battery. Playing with the notion of being able to play around with Black Zenith Gloves, right, which drop from the lesser Pinnacle boss as you sort of do Searing Exarch. And what actually ended up becoming of that is Flamewood Totems are actually a thing from League Start in particular. using rejuvenation totems as well, which is what I'm doing. And then basically it's based on projectile damage. So you just launch like an absolute metric ton of projectiles and then cripple enemies. So this is definitely something that I'm going to look at from league start for next league as well, because I think it's really cool. It's super tanky, can be played with lightning coil as well. But this is a watch this space sort of thing, sort of disclosure in this video, because I really wanted to try and get something working with Black Zenith, and then I was like, hey, it is actually functional, which I thought was really interesting. Now, as far as scaling damage, and we'll talk about this as we go through it, it actually reacts to gem level, and we use rejuvenation totems here to proc our Flamewood. And the reason being is because we also get anywhere up to sitting like 2,700 to like 5,000 or so life regeneration per second, which with Progenesis and your entire life pool being around 3,000, it means you instantly regenerate all your life every time you take damage for the damage that you do take, because I fully mitigate damage. Now, beyond this point, content you can farm with this. It's good at Blight, Delve, Heist, T16 mapping. It's not good at taking down Ubers as far as I'm aware, but potentially there is the potential to really escalate this build to that level. And basically, like, it's an all-rounder jack of trades build. It's very much like what RF used to be. Not perfect at any one particular thing, but good at most things. And because it's cheap to gear up initially and level, it's actually a really good build. And, like, nobody's playing it. So that's the other thing, too. Nobody's really playing this build. I did talk to someone in stream who did play this build on League Start with a Black Zenith route, and it was actually a really good build. But yeah, anyway, let's get into the gearing, and let's talk about that a little further. Okay, so just to talk through the skill tree before we get into gearing. So Bandit Quest, kill all. Major God, Soul Lunaris. We need the damage as we run around enemies. Helps with mitigate a lot of incoming. We've got Soligrath Cool, which just reduces the amount of damage we take from attack speed, and reduces attack speed of inbound enemy damage and attacks, and physical damage reduction up to 5%. Now, we have no other settings ticked in here. I do have, like, life regen can be ticked to average, which comes to, like, what's that? 3,056 per second. Minimum, at the lowest, we have 2,671. And at burst, we have 5,753. So, do your worst. I'm just going to leave it at average. You can make a call after that. Now, enemies are burning. They're ignited. That's how Flamewood Totems with Ignite works. I don't have any stack overrides. Is the enemy shocked? Yes, we're using skitterbots, so we do apply shock, but I don't have a percentage of shock on that, so it's basically minimal. There is fire exposure enemies, but this does nothing to the overall damage, so you don't really need fire exposure in this build, but I guess it's because it's capped, it doesn't do anything else. Now, enemies are covered in ash. Yes, we have enemies covered in ash because we have a polaric devastation in our left socket, which means enemies get covered in ash. Beyond that point, this is ticked on. It doesn't really do anything. Skill is targeting the branded enemy, makes no difference. Because we use a Arcanist brand with flammability, that's why that's in the build. Now, we don't have any of these Power Frenzy or Endurance charges ticked on. However, we have no impact from them because we run Ralakesh boots. So we have Ralakesh's Impatience as our boots, which is a big offense and defense element in this build. Nothing else is ticked on. I do technically have phasing, but if you don't want to put it in there, you don't have to. And if you can somehow figure out how to get Fortify on the build, you'll just be even tankier again. Beyond that, do you have Flask active? Yes. Have you summoned a totem? Yes. We don't have Cap Totem summoned. Consecrated Ground, we don't have Rational Doctrine or anything like that, so we don't have that ticked. Enemies nearby, we could tick on like 10 if we're playing Delve, but I left that out. No summoned totems in the past 2 seconds. We don't really have that. Sorry, we do have that applied, so that's fine. Have you ignited an enemy recently? Technically, like, that may not apply to you if it refers to you and not your totems, but we're going to take that as that applies to totems. I'm not sure whether or not there's crossover there, but it appears to affect the build, but only in a minimal way. Have you been hit recently? Yeah, we're so tanky that we just get hit constantly, and it means nothing because it's an absolute, Hank the Tank build, so it makes no difference. And then beyond that, no other settings changed here, and then we have Guardian and Pinnacle boss damage ticked on. So this, you know that this damage is actually legit. There's no like buffing temporarily or anything in this build realistically outside of flammability or Arcanus brand. And beyond that, what you'll also see is I switch when I'm delving between having Arctic Armor and Skitterbots. So when you're in delve, your damage is going to go down, but your defense is going to go up. When you're not in delve, vice versa. So just keep that in mind when you're looking through the PoB as well. I do have them both in there. You could arguably have them both ticked on, but you won't be able to cast any totems, so or set any totems. So yeah, that's it for the path of building. Okay, so gearing. Helm-wise, pardon me, the implicits are the most important roles on this helm, as well as one of the explicit roles on this, which is a, what is that, prefix modifier. Because we are mitigating or converting physical to fire damage, which it's one of those builds, this helm is a little... I think I paid like 4 to 6 div for this helm. Maybe not. I hope I didn't pay that much. Anyway, so this has 10% physical damage from hits taken as fire damage, and then the implicit of set another 7% taken from physical damage as fire damage, and then 7% of fire damage taken recouped as life. Definitely not the best helm that you can get for this type of build, but a really good helm nonetheless. Because we overcap our fire reses, we're basically mitigating 90% of our fire damage inbound, which means that every time we convert physical damage to fire damage, we're mitigating both our fire and physical damage, which is a really effective modifier. Those are the most important elements of the helm to keep in mind. Now, Scepter should just be like a focus on flat fire damage, damage over time, and any other fire dot that you can get into it. If you can get gem levels on it, the only gem level that's going to work is going to be +1 to spell skill gem levels. Nothing else will work because we're using rejuvenation totems. There's no such thing as a +1 to totem gem level unless we're talking about the amulet I'm running. And beyond that, it's not like a strength or a fire skill gem or something like that. So there's no way to get a roll on your Scepter that's going to be able to do anything aside from buffing spell skills, because that's what it is. It's a spell AoE aura sort of thing. So that's basically it for the Scepter. Now, Amulet, I'm using the greatest amulet in the game, Replica Dragon's Fang, +3 to level of rejuvenation totems, and just bear in mind the attribute requirements roll as well. We get around having to stack more dex and intelligence by having that, and then also having attributes rolled on the helm as well. And that'll get your gem level up on your vitality, on your rejuvenation totem. And the reason why that's important is because the way that Flamewood works is it's based on a percentage of your totem's life. So the more totem life that you have, the stronger this build actually gets. So if you stack totem life in your gems, or in any other factor in your jewels that you put in, that'll actually increase your damage further, which is really cool. And you'll see that in the tree very shortly. Now, for the chest piece, I've got Cloak of Flame. Makes sense. Implicit Corrupt +2 to AoE skill gems. So we get up to like gem level 25 with Rejuvenation Totem, which is really cool. Beyond that, Rise of the Phoenix. Right now, this is the best in slot shield. If I could get a corrupted one, or if I get a corrupted one, I would target, you know, conversion to fire, again, to fire damage, whatever. Biggest advantage, a straight +5% to maximum fire resistance and 183 minimum life regeneration. In this case, it can go as high as like 200. It's actually a really good shield for this type of build. Makes you super tanky, gives you ES, gives you a good amount of armor. It's just like an all-around really good shield, especially for like Ignite Chieftain builds at this stage of the game. Beyond that, we have Polaric Devastation, which is our ring needs to be in the left socket, so we get enemies covered in ash. And then we have Replica Emberwake as well, which means our ignites are a lot more potent. And if I actually put some quality into this ring, I could get that up even further. Beyond that, in my gloves, I've got implicit. I do have fire exposure on my gloves. I'm not too sure what the impact of that is. Let's assume that it works with more fire damage over time. And beyond that, I've just got an absolute ton of fire regeneration, life regeneration with flat life and damage during any flask effect crafted on this as well. This build, I have Mageblood. You could put Immortal Flesh on this build and it would be absolutely fine. Reason being, you just need to restructure your dexterity a little bit. But reason being is there's so much overcapping, and the Chieftain Ascendancy, it just leans itself so well into overcapping that it makes no difference. Now, boots, relic caches, and patience. You don't need to have a +1 endurance charge roll. I just had these boots sitting around from another build. But any relic caches is fine. Basically, best in slot. If you're leveling up, just any leveling boots or whatever is going to do fine until you can afford to get relic cache. I do have a Progenesis in this build. You don't need a Progenesis. Potentially running something like Replica Sorrow of the Divine would work just fine. And then you would have a Malevolence and Divine Blessing set up for more damage, and that should be ample. Beyond that, I've got a Ruby Flask, I've got a Basalt Flask, and a Quartz Flask. I do have a double up with the Amethyst Flask because I only just recently changed to Progenesis. Ideally wouldn't have that, and you could switch it out for like a Silver Flask or Sulfur Flask or something of that nature. But that's it for gearing at this stage. It's not like an overly complex build to gear. There is a little bit of nuance in the way that you gear it up to get around the Cloak of Flame damage reduction sort of methodology. But anyway, I'm going to do a video separately around defense layers and focus on each of the types of defenses I roll when I'm playing like Delve and stuff like that moving forwards anyway. But for now, this is pretty straightforward to gearing. Okay, so for gem setups, in the helm we're going to be running Purity of Fire. We've got level 21, so we get a lot more overcap. Or, more fire resistance. Determination, Arctic Armor, and or Summon Skitterbots. And generally, as I was saying earlier, I switch between Arctic Armor and Summon Skitterbots, depending on what I'm farming. So if I'm in Delve, I'm running Arctic Armor. If I'm mapping or anything else, I do Skitterbots. Just depends on what you're attacking. And then in my weapon slot 1, I've got Flame Dash, Shield Charge, and faster attacks. In my shield, I've got Arcanus Brand Flammability with Life Tap, because I don't want to spend mana, because I'm cheap. And I regenerate an absolute metric ton of life, so that makes sense. In my chest, I've got Rejuvenation Totem, Awaken Burning Damage Support, Flamewood Support. If you can get a level 21, it'll do more damage. Awaken Unbound Ailments, Ignite Proliferation, and I've got Awaken Deadly Ailments as well. Beyond that, in my gloves, I've got Clarity, Arrogance, and Vitality, with a Portal Gem just for good measure. And then in my boots, I've got Molten Shell, Custom Damage Taken, Life Tap Support, so that can always go off, and Enduring Cry, which I have mapped to my move button, so I always have Enduring Cry when I'm running around as well, which makes me even more sustainable when I'm in that clutch point and I'm running around and almost about to die, and then I basically regenerate 5,500 life, and that's where the burst life regeneration comes from in the PoB as well. Okay, for the skill tree. So first of all, we come down, we'll grab Heart of the Warrior. Some people may grab these nodes in here. You could do that early on. I'd recommend doing it early on, but later down the track, you really need the skill points. By the way, this is a level 98 character as well. And then we come down and grab Max Fire Res, Prismatic Skin, obviously, 2 dual sockets here down to Unwavering Stance, so we can no longer be stunned, which makes this build pretty sustainable. Then we come down and grab Champion of the Cause. I do have 8% Reservation Mastery as well. If you're struggling for resistance overcapping, instead of that, grab 1% to all elemental resistances. Now, we'll talk about this later down the track, because it's an easy way to get Panopticon and Ironwood, but yeah, anyway. So then we come up, we grab Call to Arms, we grab Bloodless, keep going up, we grab Juggernaut. Now we get this this node up here where we've socketed Impossible Escape with Iron Reflexes. So that allows us to then get everything in this vicinity of this radius, which is just actually pretty cheap, which means we can get Ironwood, Totem Life. Now, I think this has an effect, but if Panopticon doesn't, I'll double check it. You can ditch that and put that point anywhere else in the tree. But basically, that's going to let you target getting Totem Life, which is going to buff your damage up pretty significantly with this build. And it means you don't have to travel across these nodes, so you save 3 points as well, which is another big advantage of doing it this way. So compromise 1 dual socket point, you save 3 skill points and can reallocate it to other points in the tree. Beyond that point, we grab Barbarism, Life Mastery. Because we're running a Cloak of Flame, we don't need to worry about life on our chest, so we grab 15% increased maximum life. Beyond that, we grab Hearty. Then we come up and we're going to grab our first cluster jewel, large cluster jewel node. And in this case, I've got that which was taken, which gives me plus fire resistance. Now, if you can't do that, you can do that on the Primalist Ascendencies. Either way you shake it, however you want to do it, you can do it that way. And I've also got Rain of Splinters. So I've got more projectiles, which means I can ignite more things because I hit more things, which is really good. I do have Divine Shield. Because I do have about 500 ES, just means that any physical damage that I do take, I replenish that back, which is really good when you're in Delve or when you're fighting different bosses. Then I grab Devotion, Holy Dominion, I come and get Discipline and Training, and Sanctity, which gives me more regeneration. Then we grab Divine Judgment for more elemental damage. And I've got a Watcher's Iron here, which gives me recovery rate when I have Vitality, which I have set up on an Arrogance setup, and then 7% extra mana, or 7% mana as extra energy shield, which could be used defensively, or if you choose to use that as your pooling for Replica Sorrow of the Divine, if you don't have a Progenesis, it'll let you run Malevolence without having to worry about choking your ES pool out when that triggers, so you can have temporary auras running efficiently without actually not being able to sustain that. And then we come up and we grab Primal Manifestation and Ancestral Bond, so we get 2 totems, because we only ever need 2 totems. If you can find a way to get +1 to that, which would be a shaped shield, you would need to get overcapped fire res to make that work. I'll let you guys figure that one out, but yeah, there could be a crafted shield method to be able to do that pretty efficiently. And then we want to grab the 5% of damage from hits taken to your nearest totem's life before you. And the reason why that's important is my totems have 12,672 life, and they regenerate an absolute ton of life as well. So they're basically almost immortal totems. So basically, you're mitigating damage to go back against your totems, and that reduces the amount of inbound damage to yourself, as well as your totems taunting the enemy, which is why this build is quite good and extremely tanky, because you can taunt enemies. Sort of like the Explode Totem build that is no longer playable that they nerfed. And then basically we grab Sovereignty, so we get Reservation Efficiency and Sovereignty and increase our buffs. Purity of Flesh. We grab Holy Fire, and we want to grab Chance to Ignite, because we do need to get the Chance to Ignite up for Flamewood. And currently, Avenging Flame has, I think, about 85% chance to ignite. Sorry, 99% chance to ignite, which basically means we 100%, almost 100% ignite all the time. And then beyond that, I have another cluster jewel set up here with Widespread Destruction, Burning Bright, and Cremator. The reason why I have Burning Bright is bigger AoE on the totem. Avenging Flame is my understanding, means we pro-left to more enemies quicker. And then I have Brush with Death, Wasting Affliction. I do have a Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh setup, which is Hinekura's Death Fury, which is really cheap. So you could run that, or you can run pretty much any other Ascendancy sort of thing out of the Chieftain or whatnot. Like, take your pick, whatever you want to do. I like this one because it means that enemies explode, as you can see on screen, makes clear a lot better, and basically just makes the build function a lot smoother. And then I've also got Ancestral Might and Snaring Spirits over here as well, which gives me increased totem life, and then basically hinders enemies as well, which buffs up my damage. So totem life in this case buffs up my damage, and then it also reduces the ability for enemies to get to me, which increases my defensive prospect. Then I come back across up here and I grab Breath of Flames and the Ignite nodes, and this is how we get the Chieftain up to nearly 100% Ignite without having to do other weird and wacky methods. But that's basically the tree. Now, Anoint on my amulet, I have Arsonist. Life regeneration and 10% fire damage over time is pretty good. And then basically on my Ascendancies, I would normally grab, well, probably wouldn't grab that, but I would grab Moon's Presence first, Tsalo's Cleansing Waters, Valako's Storm's Embrace. And I do have Remiko's Sun's Light, so when I am near enemies, they have negative 20%, what was that, fire resistance to fire damage over time, however that works. And then basically I've got Hinekura's Death Fury from my Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame. And then beyond that, I have Might of the Bear, I have a Elementalist Corvin Charm, which gives me increased ignite, 14% increased ignite through my charms as well, which gets me up from 85% to 99%. And then basically I have Curse and Ailment immunity through every 4 seconds. Remove curse or elemental ailments from you, instead of just a different way to go about it, instead of having to try and stack ailment resistance. And then I have Culling Strike and 30% increased life regeneration rate as my second charm. I actually haven't done the King yet, so I've still got more power I could get in this build if I chose to. Rightio, so hopefully this build gives you something new and interesting to look at or play with if you're getting a bit bored, because we're getting close to the end of the league. Now, totems, are they dead? I don't think they're dead. I think we just have to look at it from a different perspective these days, because obviously the chieftains changed a lot, so slam totems, VF totems, things like that aren't really as viable as what they once were. But totems like Avenging flame totems and or flamewood totems are actually pretty cool. Ignition totems are a thing, and there's tons of different builds that we could potentially do with that. Now, this tree could also be retrofitted for like flame trap or fire trap, sorry. And other different types of builds as well, and that's something I'm going to have a look at playing with in the next few weeks as well. Now, I'm not done with totems yet. If you catch me on stream, I'm going to be leveling up a Searing Bond, damage over time totem build, and it may not be with this chieftain, it might be with the Hierophant at this stage, but I'll figure that out when I get to that point. Anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to check out all the links in the description as well. The POB, everything will be down there for you to use and check out and play with. Don't forget to like and sub to the video on the channel. Don't forget to follow the Twitch. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.